Last week we began to look at financial matters and specifically giving through the lens of Proverbs. What with our morning outreach last weekend and then Friends of Missions, charity was kind of on our minds. It just seemed like such an opportune time to talk about these things. Well, I had this wonderful talk again this week, too. I went over to Ruby's, and I happened to pop in on Frank and Ruby, and she was telling me, how it is that she comes about making a decision as to who or what to give to, and just what about those organizations that helps her to see them as wise to invest in. And she was telling me that part of her formation in those decisions was because of her son Sandy over in Gambia. He was an agriculturalist and a missionary. And so he helped clarify and solidify just how her and Frank do their giving. And I'm going to let her tell the rest of the story, because I think she's got some good things for us to learn from.
Good morning. Yes, we got involved last year with another organization called Food for the Hungry. And I have a little magazine here that we get their papers. And I'd just like to explain a little bit about this particular program they have here. It's a long-distance program. It's long range, I should say. It takes 10 years to get through this particular program. So they have some folks from Food for the Hungry to go in to a village, and they listen to what the village people have to say, how they might be able to get them to kind of work together to get out of poverty in their village. So they walk alongside the churches and the leaders, the families and the community people, and they try to set up some kind of a vision that they can see that maybe they can get this to work if they all work together. So they kind of arrange a few meetings and get them to trust each other and see how they can all work together. So then, when they get all that kind of organized, this is where we come in. We send in a donation, which we did, and that's how we got involved with this program. And so you can maybe send in some finances to cover seeds and tools to maybe make the garden. Well, and then there's another way you can send in. I'll read a little article here. You can send in enough funds to buy a goat for a farmer. So this farmer, Claude, he was in this program now already for 3 years. So he got a goat, and from the program there, and they helped him to learn how to care for the goat and to plant a good garden and to plant good food so he can feed the goat. And so he did really well. So when the goat gave birth to a kid, he was able to raise this. So there at one point in time, he was kind of short on funds and he needed to get his 5 children into school. So he had the opportunity with this goat to sell it, and that covered his funds for his children in school. So then, a long time came, and he got a second goat. Now, this one he gave back to the Community Development Committee that has running this program, and they, in turn, gave it to another farmer so he could improve his style and his lifestyle. So this is how the donation for one goat keeps growing and growing and growing. So that part of it really works, and they continue to work together, and through this 10-year program, they can get the community that used to be in poverty is now self-sustaining and able to now go out and send a couple more of their workers from their village and a representative from Food for the Hungry off to another village. And so they start this 10-year program all over again. And our one donation that we sent in just keeps growing and growing. And to us, that's really where it's at, to get our donations to just keep growing, to let them learn to help themselves so they know that they can do it too.
Helping them to help themselves. We asked you at the end of the last service just what sort of things you do before you give out any finances. Things like pray, give from the heart, not from the head were some of the answers. You must first learn to receive before you can give, someone said. Do your homework and then decide who to give to. Yeah, I think that's what Ruby was just talking about there. Someone said give and then let go, trusting God. These are like your Proverbs, the Proverbs that you kind of live by, the truths. Like all Proverbs are pithy sayings that speak of some of the truths that you've learned to live by. And they all sound so good, and I think each one is actually vital when it comes down to giving. But have you noticed that none of them stand on its own? Like, this is the way to do it. For example, if you just give and let go, ignoring the glaring and easily researched warnings, then perhaps your giving will get trampled underfoot or end up enriching some CEO's bank account and not reaching those whom you hoped it would reach. Or worse, the gift that you gave may in fact deprive the recipient of self-worth and over time cause the person to actually become dependent upon this system rather than God. And if that's the case, they're actually in worse condition and would have been better off had they not received in the first place. As we looked at how some of our compassionately motivated giving actually has the potential to become toxic, we found that it's especially toxic for those whom Proverbs labels sluggards. Such people choose not to try to break the cycle of poverty. We notice, too, that Proverbs also describes some people as leeches and others as pampered servants, and to whom benevolence is actually wasted and quickly becomes toxic. The generosity of givers potentially misses the mark altogether, and it is squandered by the cunning ways and corrupt minds that leeches employ, while pampering actually robs people of their self-initiative and willpower to work. When it does, the toxicity actually returns full circle to the giver. And what often happens at that point in time is it causes negative emotions and financial repercussions. In fact, givers may stop giving altogether, choosing instead to either hoard their wealth or become selfishly overindulgent, neglecting those who truly deserve their benevolence. And that, of course, creates this sort of false dichotomy, even among believers, it seems. But how can you and I detox our role in what seems to be this growing problem in our society and truly throughout the world. How can we remain, as the Bible calls us, cheerful givers, blessed by God, and not unintentionally harm those that we have chosen to give to? It's this question that this series wants us to grapple with. And I think in particular, God wanted me to really grapple with it as we look at our mission over in Kenya. What is it that we're actually doing? Now, I'm not sure I have a simple solution to such a complex problem. But I think that the Bible does give us plenty of examples and speaks of much wisdom that can help us personally begin to grapple with this issue. For example, we know from God's word that giving has several intrinsic rewards. Even the secular world has noticed this. Have you noticed that? So many corporations, even Fortune 500s, give benevolently. According to studies that I read online, giving actually can lengthen one's life. Is that cool or what? It increases one's self-worth, enables one to feel pretty good about life in general, and that in turn, I don't know, what does it do? Does it lower blood pressure or something? It just makes us happier individuals and we're able to live longer. That's a wonderful thing. We know from 2 Corinthians 9, verses 6 and 7, the more that you're able to give somehow, the more cheerful you become. Paul writes there, "Now I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. And he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must do just what he has purposed in his heart, not grudgingly nor under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver." So it is easy to see why people often enjoy giving. It's a good thing, even anonymously. Perhaps that's why Jesus said, "Be careful not to do your acts of righteousness before men to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets by men. I tell you the truth, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be done in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." That's Matthew 6, 1-4. Now, did you notice in this verse, and I guess I did kind of circle it for you, just in case you didn't notice, but did you notice that to Jesus, it wasn't if you give, but when? There was no question as to if one should or shouldn't give. The Bible is just far too clear on that. Jesus said, when you give, examine your motives, determine the best ways to give, then do so without expecting the praise of men. But also realize both your giving and the motive will be noticed by God, who rewards cheerful givers. In North America, wealth and prosperity and the abundant life are frankly, they're the driving factors of the lives of most people here. And get this, it doesn't seem to matter which end of the scale you happen to be on. It isn't enough to have enough. We all want more. Even those who are on the bottom end of the scale, is that true of them? Even the man who sleeps behind our church at times? Many homeless people look at what others have, and of course, they say, "Oh, I want that too." I was talking with a pastor the other day, and he shared with me this dilemma that his church is going through. Almost weekly, they have to call in the police to remove this huge mountain of stuff that homeless people bring onto the church property. The stuff they receive from, well-meaning, compassionate people, unfortunately ends up in the landfill because being homeless, well, frankly, they have no place to store it. And so they kind of bring it onto the church property, and that becomes a problem, health issues, etc. And so off it goes. But don't worry, they do know that they can go to the free store 3 days a week here and get more stuff, because very generous people have donated from their own surplus. Now, those who donated, their motive was absolutely sincere. They passed on blessings to people they didn't even know, right? It was done in secret, just like Jesus said. Don't announce it with trumpets. They just give it, not expecting any praise, no fanfare, no appreciation. They didn't ask for anything in return, really. They just gave. And God continues to bless them for it. What they have done cannot in any way be considered toxic charity. But what was done with it may have unintentionally been exactly that. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with having stuff per se. We all got stuff. Some have more stuff, others have less stuff. I got lots of stuff. Yeah, nothing wrong with it per se. And if you can afford to build, like a bigger barn, like those places that Scott keeps telling us about, the 5,000 square foot mansions that, 2 people are living in because they need the room to have all their stuff in it. Well, more power to you. I'm glad you have the ability to do that. And even if you're on the receiving end of the scale, well, I can even understand your need to collect stuff. When it becomes, if only in a small way, your security, it's an issue that we need to talk about. You see, Jesus is the only true security in life. He really is. Everything else provides us temporary relief from the stress of that insecurity that you may feel at times. But it can only be temporary at very best, which is why some people hoard things. They constantly need more in order to feel even a little bit secure. But Jesus offers us security in knowing that our Heavenly Father knows exactly what we need, and He even knows our wants and our preferences too. So cool when you see it come through. Jesus said, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from the will of your Father. And even the very hairs on your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth far more than many sparrows." He goes on to give them even more financial advice there. Stuff can never take His place. Not even tons of free stuff. It'll only cause you to feel isolated from Jesus in the end. A relationship with Jesus, that gives true security. Listen to what He said in John chapter 10, verses 28 and 29. "I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish, and no one can snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all. No one can snatch them out of my Father's hand." Dr. Lupkin expresses in his book, Toxic Charity, that there are actually less toxic ways of helping people. Instead of giving freely, you can create a venue where people who have earned a little can buy what they need at a price that they can actually afford. You know, that's what I love about places like the Salvation Army thrift store here in town. I don't know, anybody shop there? A few of us do occasionally. Yeah. They employ some of those they serve and sell to anyone who chooses to buy at a bargain. They have real expenses, and frankly, they cannot afford to simply give it away, even if they wanted to. Even if they paid nothing for it. They can't just give it away because they still need to pay, the power bill, the water bill, pay their employees, who otherwise will end up back out on the streets again, begging. The same holds true for the MCC thrift stores like this one that I've got pictured here up in Kelowna. They receive these huge mountains of donations. People are so generous in this valley, I gotta tell you. And those donations actually need to be gone through and sorted for sale, and perhaps some of it even needs to be sorted to, go to the dump, because some people are very generous in this area. And you know what? I used to feel bad about that too. I used to think, what a waste of their time, their money, having to take other people's junk to the dump for them. And then I began to understand the difference between toxic and non-toxic charities. And I can see that even a little blessing happens in paying someone to take that stuff to the dump. It gives them more purpose in life. Now, MCC stores are staffed by both volunteers who just love to give of their time, as well as paid employees who really need to feel that they are productive members of their society. Both are getting what God intends for benevolence. Instead of handouts all the time, it's a hand up in life for those in need, and a place where you can feel like you're making a difference for those who choose to volunteer there. It's kind of win-win, right? Now, the prices there, they're kept deliberately low enough so that even those who are barely making it can find a bargain and, feel good about buying it. And if that wasn't enough, MCC actually takes a portion of the funds that it makes through these stores to support crisis situations and community building throughout the world. Millions of dollars are actually raised every year through this. And MCC has actually already figured out that only in a crisis do you come in freely and give away goods and services. When people are in crisis, that's when they need that. After the crisis is over, MCC doesn't say, the crisis is over, we're out of here. No, they go on to community building efforts. They don't drop the ball there. They look and they listen. I like that about that other charity you just talked about. They listen to the people in that area and figure out what it is that they truly need. And then they come alongside and they partner with them. They partner with communities rather than simply individuals. That way there's a little less corruption, hopefully. There's always corruption in any of these things. But a little less when you're dealing with a whole group of people who are accountable to one another. It's really kind of cool. And so, people actually have to jump through these accountability hoops and show that they are serious about making a difference in their community. And then MCC will come alongside and partner with them. They even do things like they build the roads so that the farmers that they've partnered with, that they've taught how to farm, can actually get their goods to the market and sell them. Yeah, there's another one here in town called Value Village. Anybody shop there? Yeah. Guilty as charged. Yep. It's similar, except that they're actually a for-profit organization. And what they do is they take what people donate. And man, it was a stack yesterday, wasn't it, Zach? We were off dropping off some stuff as well, and it was like just piled right up outside their door. They didn't even have room anymore in the donation center there to get stuff in. Anyway, they take all this stuff that they get from, caring people, and then they use it to pay minimal wages. And Zach was a little upset about that. His father thinks that this organization doesn't pay nearly enough to their employees, and I don't know. But the organization specifically hires people who are often not able to find jobs anywhere else. These are sort of, let's get you back working again. And it's much easier when you're working to get a job, isn't it? So at least they're doing something in that sense. Whether they're paying top dollar, I doubt it, because, they're selling our stuff that we don't want anymore. They're not getting top dollar. And of course, they support community organizations. I think they even support soccer here in town. Through Big Brothers, they're helping some of those kids take part. Yeah. Kind of cool. All three of these organizations and many others like them, those who offer, similar models of charity, are not toxic charities. They have detox charity both by employing people who might otherwise have been on the streets and by helping people who have little afford the things that they need and even some of their wants as well. A detox charity does not simply redistribute the wealth by robbing the rich and giving it to the poor. And it doesn't just help the needy, it provides givers with something that they need too. People who donate to these sort of organizations know that they're helping the poor and needy in their cities to help themselves. This builds a work ethic, preserves self-worth, and that gives givers that good feeling inside. And a bonus. We get rid of some of that surplus that we don't need in our houses. And hey, it isn't just the poor and needy who shop at these places. I mean, honestly, as we were driving out, I was looking at it's like BMW, Mercedes-Benz. I'm going, what? And you know what? It's a great thing. Because everybody loves a bargain, right? On either side of the poverty, people are seldom content, though, for very long with what God has given them. And I think I kind of understand a little why that is, especially for our society. Advertisers try to make sure that we are never content with what we have. We live in this world that constantly is bombarding us with propaganda that tells us that we need more and that we cannot be content with what we have. You got to get the latest one. Have you seen the new Apple iPhone? Yeah, it does one thing different. So you should run right out there and get it. Yeah. You know how many people did on the day it was released? I hate to tell you. You know how much they made in the last quarter? It's in billions of dollars. Over one change. Now if you hold your finger down on it, it pops up with something different. Woohoo! Yeesh. Yeah. We're just never content with what we have. Yeah. So even after we've managed to get more, we're not content with that either. But how many of you would agree and actually pray this proverb here? What do you think? Lord, give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Are we all in on that? I mean, really? Is that a prayer of our heart? Be honest with yourself. Remember, God already knows your heart. And he knows actually the society norm in which we live. Is it enough to have enough? Or do you constantly strive for more? And hey, I'm not just talking about the stuff, right? Bigger bank accounts, that counts in that too. You can hoard just as much, if not more, in your bank account. Lord, give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Well, you know what? If you're one of those who's not exactly content and just has this thing about being able to create jobs and make more money, that's okay too. Yeah, it's okay if you want more than your daily bread. God bless you. So long as you're not planning to hoard what you receive, that is. God places in some this ability to amass wealth. Generally, it's in those he can trust, who will choose to give where and when needed. Now, this doesn't exempt the rest of us either from giving. It's just that God knows who can handle those big bucks and who would only end up in wanton sin if they were blessed with the big bucks. For example, the other day, I overheard someone say, actually, didn't overhear it. They told me, when I win the lotto, I'll give a bunch to that project. Yep. When I win the lotto, I'm going to give lots. I thought to myself, not likely. But I smiled and said, may it be so. What else can you do? I have seen firsthand, though, what happens with lotto winnings. I saw someone drink and party themselves to death within 2 years after winning a jackpot. And his friends, well, they thought he was the most generous, as they helped him to spend every last penny of it, leaving his wife and children without funds, even for a decent burial. Didn't have a funeral. Never mind leaving her with enough support to carry on. This, in turn, left his wife clinically depressed and an alcoholic for a time. It took her years to lay off the sauce, but by then the damage caused wrecked her life and damaged her children. Yeah. Lotteries are about the most toxic charity fundraisers at best. And don't get me started on that topic because it wouldn't be good. Anyway, so why bother giving at all if what we may give may cause someone more grief than good? You got to be wondering that by now. Well, the most obvious reason for the believer is because Jesus says that he actually keeps track of what we do unto the least of these. And the Bible is actually pretty black and white when it comes down to giving to the needy. In fact, the other night, did you know it was Zach's birthday this week? Yeah, sorry, it didn't get in the bulletin last week, otherwise we would have got him. Anyway, on Zach's birthday, we three pastor types, we were kind of sitting around and yakking, talking about Genesis 19 and the sin of Sodom. Yes, I know it's not your average conversation or usual conversation on birthdays, but hey, you have to be there for the rest of the how we got onto that topic. Anyway, I was being just a little bit cheeky and I asked, my sons-in-laws, these good pastor types, well, just what was the sin that God judged Sodom for anyway? And, the usual answers came up, the sexual sin stuff, to which immediately we had a sword drill. Don't you all do that on birthday parties? Have Bible study? No. Yeah, okay, so we're kind of a weird family. Anyway, it was very stimulating conversation, to say in the least. Unfortunately, I only had to turn to one verse to end the debate on what the sin actually was that God judged Sodom and Gomorrah for. Ezekiel 16, verse 49 says, "This was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, excess food, and prosperous ease, but they did not aid the poor and the needy." Pride, excess food, more than enough food. They became overindulgent in everything except generosity and compassion. There, they were found wanting. History books tell us that valley of Sodom was so fertile that it must have been, like east of Eden. Must have been part of the Garden of Eden at some point in time. It was the place to live the prosperity life. And with such prosperity could come even more blessings from God if mankind hadn't gotten greedy and self-indulgent. But as usual, sin. What more do you need to say there? It always wins the upper hand eventually. Everything was about themselves. Personal pleasure, feeding oneself, gluttony, living the good life, as they say. And too bad if you're not in our class bracket. That's just too bad for you. You know what? Even Lot got sucked into this prosperity culture. And other than a pillar of salt, what was it that he lost when God rained down fire from heaven? What did Lot lose? That was the pillar of salt I was talking about, yes. Yeah, he did lose his wife. What else did he lose? Here's a hint. Everything. He lost everything. Absolutely everything. He barely escaped with the clothes on his back and his daughters in tow. His son-in-laws thought, Lot was just joking. There's no way that there's something terrible going to happen to this very prosperous, beautiful community that we live in where we have everything that we could possibly want. Yeah. I've met some people who think God is a joke too. And they actually believe that their prosperity will protect them from calamity. But God always gets the last laugh when it comes down to that sort of arrogance and pride. But in all seriousness, Lot, the only righteous man in those two cities, lost everything. His prosperity was reduced to ashes overnight. Why? Well, it's right there in Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 49. Was it because they lived the good life? Is God against living well? What do you think? Our God a cosmic killjoy? Is he against enjoying the fruit of our labor, of our good fortune? No, he's definitely not against that. Was it because they neglected to aid the poor and needy? What do you think? Got a few shaking their heads. Yep. Well, kind of. That was just the outer manifestation of their inward reality. Ezekiel groups those particular inactions under one sin, and he calls it pride. It was somehow below their stature to reach out to those who needed their help. The other sin, of course, was selfishness. They had the means, but they thought there was nothing in it for them, and so why bother giving to the poor and the needy? It wasn't their inability. They had excess. That's what Ezekiel says. They had more than enough. and they wanted even more. They were driven by the same lusts that our society, thousands of years later, strive for. They wanted more. What they neglected or forgot is that everything comes from God, and therefore he has the legal right to take it all away should he choose to do so. Yeah. But should the fear of God, and specifically of his wrath, motivate us who call ourselves Christians into doing good works? Should that be our motivator? To feed the poor, to clothe the naked, to build shelter for the homeless? Should the fear of an angry God be our motivation? Do we live in that fog? Well, you know what? Like compassion that we spoke of last time, this fog too may bring about toxic results. It may cause us to give to that scammer on the street who sits day by day just begging. I read about them. There's one guy, and he's actually bragging on the internet that he makes $30,000 a year begging on the streets. Nickel and quarters and dimes at a time. $30,000 a year. That's pretty good, huh? No, it's probably not the average beggar. Anyway, night by night, he's found in the pub with his buds. Or we may feel that we're obliged because, we don't want God to strike us dead on the spot or likely stop blessing us, is why we end up going if we're afraid of him. Yeah, compassion, obligation, and guilt are actually very poor motivators for giving, even if the consequences are entirely real. The best motivation is a heart of gratitude. That's what it comes down to. For by his loving favor you have been saved from the punishment of sin through faith. It is not by anything that you have done. It is a gift of God. It is not given to you because you worked hard for it. If you could work for it, then you would be proud. But God loved you enough to save you, though it cost him dearly. When we think of how much we were given, our heart's response ought to be gratitude, the willingness to give. And frankly, for most Christians, it is. So now we just need to learn how to do it without being toxic. Amen? Do you have a prayer item or a praise item to share this morning? Remember last week, Linda Alkestrap asked us to pray for this young lady who came up to her and said that she would like to go to church. She texted me this morning that she went to church. And so they're in Caramias and doing well that way. So we can pray that this young lady will end up coming to know Jesus and maybe even has today. Any other prayer items? Can pray for Rika. We saw her on Friday, and she's really ready to go home. And she might have even made the journey already. I'm not sure. I didn't check in this morning, but do pray for her.